Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're so very excited for today's episode. But before we dive into more about today's episode, for those that may or may not know us, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Dana. I am a cosplay event and con-staff photographer. You probably have seen my photography with DragonCon, MomoCon, Anime Week in Atlanta, and even with DC Comics. I'm also a voice actor and an event planner and a whole lot more. And now I'm going to hand it over to our founder of this lovely podcast, my beautiful co-host, the lovely Moana.
Aloha mai kako, everyone. Welcome to another week of the Moana Nui Podcast. To our live and readers, thank you guys so much for tuning in and continue to support our show. My name is Moana, and as the founder of the show, I am honored to have you all with us. I am also the author of the children's book, The Adventures of Nakoa and Nohea series, editor and publisher for the Wild Card Chronicles comic book here at Burning Spear Comics, and champion and advocate for our Indigenous, POC, and African diaspora communities. We are excited tonight to have our wonderful guest, Shae. And this Shae has graciously agreed to come on our show and bring really special content to all of you that we hope will help everyone deal with some of the difficult things to talk about and ensuring that we are being focused on our mental health and with our stresses in a very healthy way. So I'll introduce Shae on. Shae Reigns, MSW, is a clinical social worker who wanted to make a change in the world her own way. She is the founder of Do More, Require Better, LLC, and host of The Conversation on the Metropolis Network. She uses these vehicles to shrink your head and expand your mind. Though most people hate conversations about relationship of any sort, Shae started her 50% of the Do More, Require Better campaign to help get her into the personal issues that we all have. On her show, she provides perspective shifting studies and hopefully helps you to redefine your life so that the only battles you succumb to are the ones you deem essential to winning the war. So with that said, let us welcome Shae to the show. Hello, Shae.
Hello, Shae.
Hi.
Hello, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're so excited to have you on the show. And of course, as Moana said in her introduction, this is something that is definitely needed within our community, not only within the BIPOC, Indigenous, and Asian community, but also within the nerd or geek community, because there's so many things that are suppressed, trauma, so much more that so many people are dealing with. So today we wanted to start this first episode on the topic, which a lot of people, as we said in the introduction, have a hard time dealing with, is having healthy conversations. Most people know how to argue. Most know how to debate, but having a healthy conversation is a whole different ballgame. So, of course, there is a saying that your feelings are valid, but your response may not be. How can one have honest conversations about their feelings and triggers without having a negative response?
Well, so I explain these kinds of interactions in my practice with my clients kind of similarly, but of course different.
Okay.
So you're always valid. you might just not your thoughts or your opinion at that point in time might just not be relevant.
Okay.
Okay, so understanding that your thoughts, your feelings, those are always valid. So even in those moments where it seems like you may be being invalidated,
Mm,
it doesn't mean that you're not valid. It just means that at that moment, whatever you're saying isn't necessarily fitting the moment.
gotcha.
It's not fitting the moment. It might not be fitting the conversation. It might not be fitting the the atmosphere. It might not be fitting the energy. It's not necessarily that it's invalid. It's just not relevant for that moment.
Mm,
It's like bringing up a conversation in June about Christmas. Let's not do that yet, right?
exactly. It's
So
like we haven't even celebrated Thanksgiving, any of the other holidays. You'll
right,
bring
right.
it
We
up.
haven't even finished summer. We're just getting to start summer. So yeah, so it's you want to be or you want to recognize that some things, while it's valid, it's just not relevant. And so
Mhm.
when you're going to be trying to open up these conversations about whatever you're going through, you just want to remember that your feelings,
Mhm.
you can express your feelings. I'm good for saying I'll have any conversation anytime, any place. But there's still a time and a place for everything.
Yes.
So, in those moments we just have to make sure that we remember to stay relevant to the conversation, to the context of where you are. And of course, try to make sure that your 50% of that interaction brings your best foot forward.
Mhm. Exactly. Now, of course, as we said in your intro, difficult conversations are hard to have within relationships, no matter the type, whether it's a friendship, dating relationship, even our family. What tips would you provide in navigating a difficult conversation with empathy and understanding?
That's a great question. And I'm glad you said with empathy and understanding, because empathy is basically the foundation of all of our interactions. Okay. So let's say you're at a store, right? You're getting checked out. The person who's checking you out looks like they smell something stink. Okay. Looks like they've had like the absolute worst day.
Mm,
And instead of saying, thank you, have a nice day, it's just like, uh-huh. Right? Now,
mm-hmm.
you have the choice to get butthurt and feel some type of way about that interaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a complete stranger. Why would you waste your energy?
Yes.
Okay. On the other hand, because it's a complete stranger, you could also choose to say something nice to that person that maybe could be the one nugget of positivity that they've had the entire day.
Mm,
That's the empathy element of it,
yes.
where you look at the situation and number one, you choose to get out of your own feelings to recognize that that person is entitled to theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And then you make the decision as to whether or not you're going to actually engage and exchange energy with that person
Mm-hmm.
in a way that hopefully reflects the best part or the best elements that you have to offer. And if we do that in all of our interactions, whether it's with a complete stranger or your best friend or your mom or your sibling or whoever it is, no matter who we're talking to, no matter who we're dealing with, if we bring in ourselves from the perspective of this could be a big deal, or I can simply
Mm,
choose to take myself out of it
yes.
and let them feel whatever it is that they're feeling, because I wouldn't want anyone to try to impede on my feelings when I'm feeling them.
Yes.
That's how the empathy comes in. So let's say, for example, um, now we're having this intimate conversation about drug addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. sometimes those conversations can get really, really heated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's usually a lot of judgment, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt going on. Sometimes there's a lot of blame. Mom, how could you expect me to not do this drug when you did the same thing when you were my age? That kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Blame, right? But what you actually want to do so that you can have a conversation, because once that happens, you're not having a conversation. You're not communicating anymore. No one's listening.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's just waiting for their turn to get their hits in.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have the empathy and the exchange and in the end be able to come together, remember that, okay, let's say you're the mom. Remember that your position in this person's life is mom.
Yeah.
Your position in this person's life is guidance. Your position in this person's life could be best friend, whatever that is, but you're still mom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So you remember what your position is in that person's life, and you remember how to honor that position, which, from the perspective of a mom, is usually understanding,
Yeah.
patience. I might want to knock your head off, but I did bother myself with carrying you for all of those years. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess, right? I guess I could be understanding today, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say you're the child, right? Of course, you're going to come from the same position of how do I honor my position as the child or the offspring, because you might be an adult child in this relationship. This is my mom. This is the person who brought me through. Okay. Even if your relationship with your mom isn't necessarily that great, if you're sitting there having a conversation of this magnitude with your mom, likelihood is she's still pretty valid to you. Right. So you don't want to attack your mom because you wouldn't want anybody else attacking your mom.
Yes.
So you treat that interaction the way how you would want it to be treated otherwise. You come with the respect that you would have for the position that person holds in your life and for the position that you would like them to continue to hold. And sometimes that also means respecting yourself enough to walk away.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's,
And that's usually the hardest because so many people want to get that last word in.
Mm.
And it's one of those, it's like, no, no, no. Oh, you're not. I'm going to say what I, oh, no, you're not. I'm going to be the last one to say something. Oh, no. And it's one of those aspects at the same time. I always wonder because we always heard the saying, never go to bed angry.
Mm-hmm.
Having those kind of conversations, a lot of times, even though it may be healthy, you're getting your feelings out. They're getting their feelings out. You'll have those raw emotions still. Can you truly not go to bed angry after that kind of conversation, having that kind of conversation like that with your family member or your loved one or even one of your friends, and you have a blowout like that? Can you truly not go to bed angry?
Yes, you can. It shouldn't be mandatory? Absolutely not. Right? Because we're people. We're
Mm-hmm.
human beings and we're going to do things that human beings and people do. Like the conversation is over and you walk away and you're still having the conversation in your head. And so you just stay mad, right? Yeah, yes. You laughing because that's exactly how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You stay mad
Or
for
you
that
remember
extra.
what you wanted to say
Right.
that you couldn't say in the moment. Oh, I should have said that.
Stick a pin in it for tomorrow at breakfast. Or you go the uncle way and it's one more thing, and you walk back into the room. Yes, that's how that goes. Okay, we get it. So definitely no, it shouldn't be mandatory that you don't go to sleep angry, because you know what? Sometimes you're gonna need that sleep to actually let your subconscious take over and do that thing that it does, because it is a wonderful tool.
Mm-hmm.
If you allow it to do its job, to actually work through your own shit, excuse me, work through yours, all right? So that way you can come back to the table and say, okay, so about that thing that I said or did that maybe I shouldn't have said or done, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the moment, that same night, during that same conversation, in that same energy, you aren't listening anymore. You're not hearing anymore. You're certainly not communicating anymore. All you're doing is waiting for your turn to get your hits in.
Mm-hmm.
I would much rather you go and take a nap, come back with a well-rested mind, and then say, okay, let's try this again.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're busy worried about going to sleep angry, and listen, some of the root of that whole saying has to do with people going to sleep and not waking up.
Yeah.
And you don't want the last words you say to somebody to be something hurtful.
Yeah.
Which is why I talk about the 50% all the time. Your 50% of that interaction should always be with the understanding that it could be the last thing you ever say.
Mm.
If you make sure that your 50% of every interaction is above and beyond what you would normally think is bare minimum,
Mm-hmm.
then you know that you've come to the table correctly, that you've done your part. If you're out here or out there saying hurtful things or just trying to get in that last stab, the only one who's really going to be losing is you.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, and I think it takes a special level of maturity
Yes.
to always be constantly um, um, it's like heated arguments, like you were talking about. I've had my share for sure, but definitely, knowing when to say when and when to just put
Mm-hmm.
pause on the conversation. It's kind of like being mindful of the energy of the other person too, and understanding that even sometimes the hurtful things that they're saying to you has nothing to do with you either. Like it's just
Yeah.
whatever they're walking from, like whatever they absorb throughout the day, and you just happen to be the person that they're lashing out at. But then you as a person, you're like, well, what the hell was that?
Right.
So I really love that you put the onus on both parties, because that's what communication is. Successful communication takes two parties, right? Like each
Mm-hmm.
one has to be willing to work on themselves and trying to seek out that successful exchange and whatever that might be. But if there's one side who doesn't, like, what tips do you have, like, for folks who just, no matter how hard you try, they're not quite, as mature or as self-aware of their own energies and things like that.
Mm.
We are only responsible for ourselves.
Yeah.
Period.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's like you can't you once you come to a place where you actually want to start learning how to communicate, right? And how to have conversations. We're talking about recognizing that not everybody is going to be on quote unquote your level.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is not there yet, it's not your job to try to drag them up to where you are. Even if they feel like it's their job to drag you down to where they are. Your job is to stay where you're at. Stay on your level, stay in your lane, right? You play your position. That's it. That's all you're responsible for. Anytime we try to step out of that, that's when we end up with extra stress and extra strife. And who needs that?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to go into any kind of an interaction, and any point in there you're like, oh, I need to change this person's mind, you already messed up.
Mm.
You just quote unquote lost that battle. The objective of conversation is to exchange information. Whether the person chooses to believe, accept, or agree, that's not on you. That's not your job. That's not your responsibility. That is not your lane. So when you go into a conversation or you go into an interaction and you see that the person is just like really not, just not, whatever level of not they're at, that's where they stop, right?
Exactly.
Let them have that. That's like, would you go to a 5-year-old? Not to say that everybody is, everybody who doesn't have healthy conversations is immature or whatever. Some of them just don't know yet, okay? All right. But would you go to a 5-year-old and then actually get mad when they can't communicate on your level?
Mm.
What are you going to do? Drop a dictionary on them and tell them to go learn these words and come back when they're ready? So, no, you're going to meet the 5-year-old at their level, and you're going to let them be at their level for however long it takes. And of course, when we're talking to 5-year-olds, we also have to remember that our job, when it does come to children, is to make sure that they get to learn the best example possible.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're treating everybody like 5-year-olds, we want to make sure that what they're learning is the best example possible.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now we have from Brad from the audience. He says, going to bed angry is almost an every night occurrence for me. The book 10% Happier by Dan Harris was recommended to me. Have you heard of this book? And if so, what are your thoughts?
I have not heard, well, let me rewind. I have not read this book. I actually have heard of it, but I have not read the book. So I don't have any thoughts, and I wouldn't want to weigh in on something that I don't have any experience with. What I can tell you is that if you're going to bed angry almost every night, hard to swallow pills, right? You are the common denominator in every interaction you have. That means that you are your own problem. So that means you're also your own solution. If you see that you are going to bed angry every night, in the same way that maybe you would eat a certain kind of meal and find that you have heartburn and then decide, I guess I'm not going to eat that before bed anymore. Same thing. Gosh, I go to bed angry almost every night. What am I doing before I go to bed that might be triggering this anger? I guess I should stop doing that. Done. If it's something a little bit deeper, then take several steps back, not just one or two, several steps back. Remember your empathy. Remember that whoever it is that you're angry with is only a small reflection of you. And your responsibility in that is to make sure that the part of you that you're reflecting is the best part. If you start having an interaction that's going to maybe make you angry, say, okay, I'm going to stop here because I don't want to be angry anymore. And let me be really clear. Just because we're talking about going to bed angry, we don't want to wake up angry. We don't want to be in the shower angry. We don't want to be driving angry. Okay? We don't want to be eating angry. Have you ever had a meal angry? that is usually like the hardest meal ever. It's like it's all of a sudden hard to chew. You're swallowing extra hard for no reason. You're spilling stuff, you're dropping things, and everything is just like, this is not the meal that I was meant to have.
Yes.
You don't want to do
Yes.
anything angry, really.
Mm-hmm.
So going to bed is kind of just like the tip of the iceberg. You don't want to do anything angry. So take your steps back, reflect, check yourself, see how you can solve your issue. Because if you're the one who's angry, that's your part of the 50%. Your 50% would be that you're reflecting anger. And when you look in a mirror and you're reflecting something, guess what you're getting back? The same thing. Take a step back. Go look at something different. Go take a walk. Have a drink of lemonade or hard lemonade, whatever floats your boat. Whatever works. Okay. Chill out, have a seat, and then come back. Or not. So that way you can actually get to bed and not be angry.
Yes, Brad said that's a sound assessment, and I have been contemplating some life changes, and he appreciates it.
You are most welcome.
We have from JD. He says, anytime I'm about to go to bed angry at someone, I use their email and phone numbers to put them on every junk spam sales call and email list I can. And I sleep like my initials, ZZZ. He says, if you ever get a call about your car's extended warranty, that's because you made a mad.
It's you, JD.
Listen, JD, I'm gonna need you to stop what you're doing. Okay, I don't know you. Why do you keep having these people call me like this? All right, let's sit here and we'll have this conversation. Let's get along, because if they call me one more time,
Right.
I'm gonna have to sip some hard lemonade myself. but no, thank you for inserting some levity there. It's really actually important also to look at how you handle your anger. If it's, we'll say, not necessarily the most positive reflection that you can provide in that moment. Listen, if that literally actually does make you happy, it is not my job to tell you to stop what's making you happy. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, whatever you're angry at, if that comes back at you, you might want to consider at least not doing the phone calls. Maybe just the emails. Yeah. Maybe just the emails.
Yeah.
Limit your toxicity.
Exactly. It's kind of like my grandma used to say, you have to transfer the bad energy out instead of internalizing and letting it fester. So she's like, whether it's going for a run, going for a walk, getting into some kickboxing, punching something out that is a bag and not a person, right. If painting's your thing, that is your outlet, find those positive outlets. And I know a lot of times people, they tend to find those negative coping mechanisms versus mm-hmm. the positive ones that give that good energy back to us to kind of give us that fulfillment. How important is it for that positive coping mechanism when you're dealing with your anger versus diving into those negative coping mechanisms? And for those that may not know them, what's the difference between the two?
Great questions. Let me start with the definition, right? So when we want to say a negative or maladaptive coping mechanism, we're talking about the things that you do that ultimately are actually hurtful for you. Pretty simple. So a maladaptive coping mechanism is drinking. if in order to feel good or to feel better or whatever requires a drink or 7, That is a maladaptive coping mechanism. On the
Especially if
other
it's every
hand,
day.
right? Because we live on this planet and it be stressful out here. Okay? We're not necessarily saying, hey, any drink you take is a horrible thing and you're maladaptive and you're broken and whatever other negative crap that people want to unload and make themselves feel better for. That's not what we're here for. Okay, so you have a maladaptive coping mechanism. The good part about it is that if you have a maladaptive coping mechanism and you're still here, we're happy for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? As long as you are still here, that means there is still a chance to help you learn some other tools. Okay? And when I say maladaptive coping mechanism, I'm going to go down the long list of drug addictions, chemical addictions, cutting, self-flagellation, whatever that is that you do, gambling, driving too fast and risking your life, jumping off of cliffs, whatever you do that is maladaptive for you, because what's maladaptive for me might not even necessarily be maladaptive for you. Because, you know, you might actually need some of those things, like literally need some of those things in order to do what you do. If running 10 miles works for you, I mean, that sounds insane to me, because that's like every time you're going to get upset. And depending on where you live, that could literally be every 5 minutes. Drive in Atlanta for an hour and you're going to run 50 miles that day. You might just abandon your car and run those 10 miles to get the rest of the way home. Okay. So I get that, 10 miles running for me, that's not going to relieve my stress. On the other hand, perhaps sitting down and meditating for 10 minutes will work for me. Mm-hmm. Whatever maladaptive coping mechanism you have, it gets to be self-identified. And then you get to work through it for yourself. Mm-hmm. The positive things, I don't want to define that for you, but let's just say whatever it is, it's not going to be something that's going to hurt you. It's not going to be something that you have to be ashamed of. It's not going to be something, well, depending on your circles, because some people look down on those of us who meditate. But it just depends on whatever, but it's not going to be something that's hurt to you. It's not going to be something that you have to do in moderation or whatever. Your positive coping mechanisms are going to be the things that uplift you and make you just feel good in general. Mm-hmm. Okay. So like for me, that is meditating. For you, that could be walking, that could be running, that could be going to the gym and exercising, that could be talking to a friend, or mm-hmm. by the way, a therapist. Please add that to your list of coping mechanisms. Whatever that is that actually helps you on the surface without the long-term negative side effect. Hmm. So that's going to be your negative versus your positive coping mechanism. Yes. In terms of how to develop them, you develop positive coping mechanisms the same way you develop any other habit. Practice. Mm-hmm. If you find something that does not hurt you, that works for you, do it. Mm-hmm. And do it some more. And then you know what? Go ahead and do it again. As a matter of fact, do it again after that. And the more you keep doing it, you'll develop a new coping mechanism. And if you do it enough, you can actually, for the most part, replace the old one. And I say for the most part because we have to be fair. In extreme crisis situations, your oldest, strongest habits will come back. Mm-hmm. That's why they say once you're an addict, you're always an addict. Because in extreme crisis situation, those leanings will always come back, and you will always have to find a way to choose to do something different. But it's a hell of a lot easier to choose to do something different once you actually know what your options are. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Now, I'm going to go into, we have about 10 minutes, so we're going to get 2 more questions in with you. One of them tend to be a hot topic that men often are told growing up not to show their emotions, to keep everything inside. And because of that, conversations often suffer as they become adults on how to communicate with their loved ones, within relationships, whether it's friendships or dating relationships. How can a man move past those habits to start becoming better?
I don't want to say better.
Or communicate better.
I don't want to say better as in this case specifically because we don't want to have the attachment of there being something wrong with whatever you're doing now. There are some people out there who this works for. And again, like I said before, it's not my job to come out here and basically kick down all your doors because your doors don't match mine. Okay? So I don't want to say better. I definitely want to say different. Different can be beautiful. Different can be great. Different is generally new and amazing and exciting. And then, there's also the scary, which is actually the bigger part and the more important part when it comes to actually learning how to do this whole healthy communicating thing. It is scary if you've never done it before to open up and be vulnerable. So if you are looking to maybe start being a little bit more vulnerable, number one, I commend you. Thank you for at least even thinking about taking those steps. And the next thing is find someone who is worthy of your vulnerability. Because especially if it's your first time, you might as well treat it like virginity. Let it be with someone special. And when you do that, you will hopefully be able to get that first magical experience of, oh my gosh, so this is what it's like to actually be vulnerable and then have someone be vulnerable with me.
Right.
Because on the other side of that interaction is the other 50%. And the other 50% is if someone comes to you and is giving you that gift of vulnerability, it is your duty, says I, to treat it like a gift, to honor it, to appreciate it, to be gentle with it, to be careful with it, not be flippant and not be toxic, but to be there and to allow that person to experience what you probably already know is how vulnerability works. And of course, practice.
Yes.
Do it again and then do it some more.
Definitely. All right. Well, our next one is we're going to tap into our ladies. Women often have to multitask and juggle the stress of raising a family and managing their career, or even if they don't have kids, it's still managing a family if you have a spouse.
Yeah.
What are some healthy habits or de-stressing tips you found to be most useful for your clients and the women in your life?
There is strength in sisterhood. I'm going to say that again. There is strength in sisterhood. And of course, I'm not talking about those other women who you were born to. I'm talking about the random chick on the street who gives you a compliment on your shoes and makes you feel good for the rest of the day. Doesn't even have to be a best friend. I promise you, if you know that you have a hard time or you're having a hard time, it starts with giving what it is that you're looking to receive.
Mm.
So be that chick who looks at another woman and says, "Oh, wow, you look great today," even if you have never seen her another day in your life.
Mm.
And the smile on her face will reflect to you. There's a thing called mirror neurons that we have in our brain. And that is how we end up getting that infectious laughter or the yawn. That if one person does, you'll get an entire train of 50 people yawning and don't even know why.
Mm.
Mirror neurons. If you are kind to someone else will by accident be kind to you. It's kind of just how the universe works. And then you move forward into building your sisterships. And sometimes your sisterships, again, aren't necessarily with your best friend or your sister or even your mom. It's with the random woman at the checkout counter. It's, "Hey, random stranger. Thank you for existing in this space today. Because I have to exist in this space. And the fact that you are existing in this space without asking me for anything like everybody else in my life does, it makes a difference that now, because you're in that space and someone else isn't, I can relax for the next 3 seconds." And of course, you don't have to say that out loud because that's a lot to say to a stranger. But at least you can acknowledge it for yourself that, man, if I was sitting here with my kids, I'd have to be a parent, but they're not.
Mm.
Thank you, kind strangers. Because the myth of "I don't have time" is very strong. Every minute of every second of every day, you are not actually doing something. So in the quiet 2 breaths between you opening your front door, that is a moment that you can acknowledge something great for that day. Take a moment to take an extra breath before you walk into your home. Take a moment to take an extra breath before you walk out of your bedroom to parent. It will make a world of difference in how you experience things if you take care of your own energy. And then build your sisterships.
Yeah, that is absolutely great advice. Sometimes it is just that extra breath, like, okay, I can do this,
Yes.
like just centering yourself. And I find that I have to be very conscious about that too, especially when you're dealing with the stresses of your life, right? It's like, okay, kind of back to what you're saying. Let me go for a walk away from this situation because right now I'm not in a healthy headspace.
That's right.
And let me come back and look at it with fresh eye or whatever. I'm gonna go get me my favorite soda or my favorite snack, whatever, and then come back.
Mm-hmm.
But I
And
really
don't forget the power of water.
Yes, water. No, I really love that perspective though of being the gratitude of the moments, right? The little ones that we often overlook.
Yes.
Because we're too busy worrying about the stresses or what might come, or manufacturing sometimes things in our head that don't even exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It's so important. It's so important that one breath can reorient you into your current moment so that you don't walk into whatever your next space is, dragging either wherever you're coming from with you or interjecting an energy that isn't necessarily even there because you think it's going to be.
Right.
Definitely. Mm. Well, we're getting at the end of the show. Of course, I know we were just getting into the meat of it, but the beautiful part is we're going to be having Shae every month talking about something different. Of course, as you're seeing, we're sharing some of the platforms. You can follow her on her Facebook for her blog. She's on Twitter also. You can follow her on Twitter, and then you can also follow her on the platform she has for the conversation on the Metropolis Network, their website of knowing when she's going to be on their on the shows with the Metropolis Network. You can also follow her there and keep in contact. But of course, as she said anything earlier, if you have something that is more personal that you need to talk to her about, reach out, set an appointment, and definitely get that conversation going, whether it's for you, for a loved one, or anything else. So we want to thank Shae for her time. Also, we want to be very conscious of her time because she has to go to an 8 o'clock. This is how busy this woman is. So once again, we thank her so much for being on the show. Definitely tune in next month on July 29th. It's going to be the last Thursday of every month at 7 o'clock p.m. We're going to have her on the show talking about different topics. So definitely tune in and be on the lookout for when we post about that episode. So once again, any closing words you would like to give before we go ahead and end this episode with you?
My show, The Conversation, is all about having conversations. And I'd be wrong if I didn't tell you the most important takeaway of today's conversation is to have one or several, because the life you save doesn't necessarily have to be your own.
I love it.
Definitely. Well, everyone, thank you again for tuning in. We thank Shae for being a part of today's episode. Definitely tune back in at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, where we'll have our next guest on the podcast, Greg Anderson Elise. He's going to talk about his current Kickstarter, his comics that he has out there, and his newest project that is coming out. To tune in more about that right at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you later on this evening. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Aloha.